Explain why client data left this building under your name, Ms. Whitfield, or explain nothing at all.
I didn't leak anything, and one day you'll wish you'd looked at me before you decided that. Sir, security just flagged something in her exit file. You're going to want to see this before she reaches the elevator.
Nobody in that boardroom expected Kang Jiho to fire someone over a report he hadn't even finished reading. But nobody in that boardroom knew what the security file sitting unopened on Grace Min's tablet was about to reveal, that the woman he just humiliated in front of the entire global strategy division was the same woman who, 3 years earlier, had pulled him out of the Han River and refused to leave his side until his heart found its own rhythm again. Amara Whitfield didn't know he'd spent 3 years and a small fortune trying to find her. She only knew that she'd walked into that boardroom with a clean record and walked out with a box of desk items and a badge she'd have to return by Friday. She'd learned a long time ago that saving someone rarely came with thanks attached, she just hadn't expected it to cost her a paycheck too. Kang Jiho didn't know the woman he just fired was the one person in Seoul he actually wanted to find. He only knew that something about the set of her jaw as she walked out had followed him back to his office and refused to leave. Neither of them knew yet. But they were about to. The elevator ride down from the 42nd floor took 90 seconds, and Amara Whitfield spent every one of them refusing to cry. 3 years in Seoul had taught her how to hold her face still in rooms that wanted to watch her break, client meetings where she was the only black woman and the only American, board reviews where her numbers were checked twice as often as anyone else's. She'd built a reputation on being right and being quiet about it. She had not built a reputation on getting fired in front of 40 people for a leak she hadn't caused. Ms. Whitfield. Security waited by the lobby desk, apologetic in the way people get when they know they're doing something unfair and can't stop it. I just need your badge. She set it on the counter without a word. Her hand, for 1 second, rested flat against the marble, long enough for the faint pale scar across her palm to catch the light. She didn't think about where that scar came from. She never let herself think about it in public. Upstairs, Kang Jiho was still standing where she'd left him, staring at a closed door. Sir. Grace Min stepped into the room he hadn't left in 10 minutes, tablet held against her chest like a shield. You didn't read the full report before you fired her. I read enough. You read the summary Derek Salas handed you an hour before the board meeting. Grace's voice stayed level, the way it always did when she was about to say something he didn't want to hear. The forensic log on the leak hasn't even finished processing. Jiho's jaw worked once. Then process it. I already did. Grace set the tablet on the table, screen dark. I wanted you to hear it from me first. The timestamp on the leaked file predates Amara Whitfield's access window by 6 hours. For a long moment he said nothing. 3 years of running this company had taught him to make decisions fast and defend them harder. His grandfather had built Kang Global on speed, not hesitation, and Jiho had learned that lesson so well it had calcified into a habit he rarely questioned. He was questioning it now. Then who, he said, sent it? I don't know yet. But I know it wasn't her. And I know you fired someone in front of the entire division based on an hour-old summary from a man who's been angling for her promotion for months. Jiho looked at the door again, the one Amara Whitfield had walked through 20 minutes ago with a box under her arm and her spine perfectly straight. He didn't remember deciding to be the kind of executive who fired first and verified later. He remembered, distantly, a version of himself who used to ask more questions, before the company, before the accident, before 3 years of learning that trusting people cost him more than it ever paid back. Bring her back in, he said finally. Not to fire her again. To find out what actually happened. Grace didn't move right away. She's already gone, sir. She left the building 4 minutes ago. He was already reaching for his coat. Before we continue, if you'd saved a stranger's life and gotten nothing but silence in return, would you ever tell them who you were, or would you let it stay a secret? Jiho didn't catch her in the lobby. By the time he reached the ground floor, Amara Whitfield was already 3 blocks away, walking fast through the kind of Seoul afternoon crowd that swallowed a person whole if they wanted to disappear. He stood on the sidewalk outside his own building, feeling something he hadn't felt in years, the specific helplessness of losing someone he couldn't immediately find. It wasn't a new feeling. It was, in fact, the oldest feeling he owned. 3 years ago, a storm had put his car into the Han River, and a stranger had pulled him out of the water, kept his heart going with her hands on his chest, and vanished into the sirens before he'd opened his eyes long enough to see her face clearly. All he had left of her was a voice, low, steady, repeating the same 4 words like a lifeline, "Stay with me. I've got you." He had spent 3 years in a private search team trying to find the person who said them. "You're not going to catch her on foot," Grace said, arriving beside him slightly out of breath. "And chasing her down the street is not going to convince a wrongfully terminated employee that this company respects her. Then what do you suggest? Do it properly. Formal reinstatement, formal apology, in writing, before legal makes you do it anyway." Grace paused. "And maybe ask yourself why you're standing on a sidewalk chasing a woman you spoke to for 90 seconds. He didn't have an answer for that. Not one he was ready to say out loud. For kilometers away, Amara sat in her apartment with a box of desk items she hadn't unpacked and her sister's number pulled up on her phone, thumb hovering over the call button. She didn't press it. She'd promised herself a long time ago that she wouldn't call home crying about work, not after everything her family had already carried, not after the year her sister spent going in and out of hospitals while Amara was on the other side of the planet building a career nobody back home fully understood. She'd left Atlanta to prove something. Getting fired for someone else's mistake wasn't part of the plan. She opened her laptop instead and started updating her resume, hands steady, jaw tight. A message came through from an unknown number before she'd finished the second bullet point. "This is Grace Min, Chairman Kang's Chief of Staff. There has been an error in your termination. Please call me at your earliest convenience." Amara read it twice. Then she closed the laptop, set her phone face down on the table, and allowed herself exactly 60 seconds to feel something before she picked it back up and typed 4 words of her own. "I'm listening. Go ahead." She was not going to make this easy. Not after today. Amara agreed to one meeting. Not a reinstatement, not yet, just a conversation, on her terms, in a conference room with the door open and Grace Min present as a witness. Kang Jiho stood when she walked in, which surprised her more than she wanted it to. "Ms. Whitfield." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Thank you for coming back. I didn't come back for you." She sat, spine straight. "I came back because Grace said there was an error, and I want it on record." "There was an error. Mine." The words came out stiffer than he meant them to. "The leak predates your access window. I fired you off a summary. I should have verified myself." "You did." She held his gaze. In front of 40 people. He didn't look away from that either, which she hadn't expected. Most people in his position deflected. He just absorbed it, jaw tight, and let it land. "I'm reinstating you, effective immediately, with a formal written correction to your file. And I'd like to personally oversee the investigation into where the leak actually came from." "Why personally?" "Because I owe you that much." Something in the way he said it, flat, certain, like a debt he'd already decided to pay in full, snagged on something in the back of Amara's mind. She pushed it away. She was good at pushing things away when they were inconvenient. "Fine," she said. "But I want Derek Salas nowhere near my project files until this is resolved." Jiho's eyes sharpened slightly. "Why Salas specifically?" "Because he's been telling anyone who'll listen that I only got shortlisted for the promotion because I'm easy to root for as a diversity story." She said it without heat, the way you say something you've had to say too many times to still feel it fresh. People like that don't usually stop at gossip. Grace, silent until now, made a note. Jiho studied Amara for a moment longer than was strictly professional. There was something in the set of her jaw when she said "God, you don't usually stop," something familiar he couldn't place, a rhythm he'd heard before in a moment he mostly remembered as water and noise and someone's hands refusing to let him slip under. "Ms. Whitfield," he said slowly. "Have we met before?" "Before yesterday?" Amara's hands, folded on the table, went very still. "No," she said. "I don't think so." It was the first lie she told him. It would not be the last easy one. The investigation took 11 days, and somewhere around day 6, Amara stopped expecting Kang Jiho to disappoint her. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't become a different person overnight. He was still blunt, still impatient with slow answers. But he showed up at 8 every morning to review the forensic logs personally, and by day 6 he'd started bringing 2 coffees instead of 1, setting the second down at her desk without comment, like it was simply logical that a person working past 9 should have caffeine. "You don't have to do that," she told him the 3rd time. "I'm aware. He didn't stop doing it. They found the first real thread on a Thursday night, both of them still in the office long after the floor had emptied, a login timestamp that put Derek Salas in the system at an hour he'd claimed to be at a client dinner. That's not proof, Jiho said, staring at the screen. But it's a start. It's proof he lied about where he was. That's usually a start. Amara leaned back, exhaustion pulling at her voice in a way she didn't usually let show at work. I just want it to be over. I'm tired of people deciding what I am before they ask. Jiho was quiet for a moment. I did that. Decided what you were before I asked. You did. I'm not going to pretend that's a small thing. He said it plainly, no performance in it. I've spent 3 years telling myself I'm careful with people. I fired you in under a minute. Amara studied him, really studied him, the tired line of his shoulders, the way he still hadn't loosened his tie even at 10 at night. There was something underneath the control that she recognized, though she couldn't have said from where. Why does this matter so much to you? She asked. Most CEOs would let legal handle a wrongful termination and move on. He hesitated, which she hadn't seen him do before. There's someone I've been trying to find for a long time, he said finally. Someone who did something for me once and disappeared before I could thank her properly. I think, he stopped, shook his head slightly. I think firing you the way I did reminded me of everything I've failed to find. I didn't want to be careless with someone else. Amara's chest tightened in a way she didn't have a name for yet. That's a strange kind of guilt to carry for 3 years, she said quietly. Some debts don't come with an expiration date. She looked down at her hands, at the scar she kept out of sight, and said nothing at all. The board meeting where Jiho's grandmother announced the proposed merger with Yoon Industries landed the same week the investigation into Derek Salas was set to conclude, and Amara knew, the moment she heard about it, that the timing wasn't coincidence. A marriage alliance, Amara repeated flatly, standing in Grace's office. In this century. A merger with a marriage attached, technically. Grace didn't sound thrilled about it either. Chairwoman Kang has wanted this since before Jiho took over. Seo Yun isn't a villain, for what it's worth. She's caught in this the same as he is. Amara didn't answer. She told herself it wasn't her business who Jiho married for the company's sake. She didn't fully believe it once. Derek Salas found her before she reached her desk. Heard the investigation's almost done, he said, leaning against the wall beside her like he had every right to be there. Funny how fast things move when the chairman's personally involved. Almost makes a person wonder why he cares so much. Get to the point, Derek. I did some digging of my own. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Turns out there was a rescue on the Han River 3 years back, same week Kang Jiho's accident made the internal incident report nobody was supposed to see. Hospital transfer records. A Jane Doe volunteer statement. He tilted his head. Blood type matches yours, Amara. So does the timeline. Her stomach dropped, but she kept her face still, the same stillness that had gotten her through the boardroom firing. You've been digging through hospital records to save yourself, she said quietly. That's not investigation. That's a threat. Call it what you want. I'll take it public before your little partnership with the chairman finishes wrecking my career, unless you convince him to drop this and let the leak thing quietly disappear. No. The word came out before she'd finished deciding it. Derek's smile faltered, just slightly. You'd rather I tell him myself? In front of the board, maybe, right after they announce his engagement. Amara's hands curled at her sides, the scar on her palm pressing pale against her skin. I'd rather tell him myself, she said. On my own terms. Not yours. She turned and walked toward Jiho's office before she could talk herself out of it, heart pounding harder than it had in 3 years, since a night on a riverbank when she'd pressed her hands to a stranger's chest and refused to let go, and told herself, the way she was telling herself now, that the truth mattered more than being safe. She got 2 steps from his door before Grace intercepted her, expression tight. You need to see this before you go in, Grace said, turning her tablet around. Derek already sent it. To the whole board. He just found out the truth the hard way. Do you think some secrets should be told immediately, no matter the cost, or is Amara right to want the truth on her own terms? Jiho was standing at his window when Amara finally reached his office, the tablet Grace handed him earlier still open on his desk, Derek's message glowing on the screen, hospital records, timeline, blood type, 3 years of a private search finally, accidentally, answered by a man trying to save his own career. He turned when she came in. He didn't say anything for a long moment, and the silence stretched long enough that Amara almost walked back out. "It was you," he said finally. "Not a question." "Jiho." 3 years. His voice wasn't angry. It was something rawer than anger, something that cracked slightly around the edges of his usual control. 3 years, a search team, more money than I'll admit to spending, and you've been sitting across a conference table from me for 6 weeks. I didn't plan for you to find out like this. Amara's composure, the same composure that had carried her through a boardroom firing and a hallway threat, finally slipped. "I didn't plan for you to find out at all. I was going to tell you myself. Today. On my terms, not because Derek Salas decided to weaponize a hospital record to save his own job. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" It was an accusation. It sounded, if anything, like genuine confusion. "You've watched me search for you for weeks and said nothing. Because the moment I say it out loud, I stop being someone you respect for my work and become someone you're grateful to." Her voice shook, the first real crack in 3 years of careful composure. "Do you know what that does to how people see you, when they find out the reason you got a second chance wasn't your competence? I've spent my whole career here being underestimated. I wasn't going to hand anyone a reason to say I only kept my job because I once pulled a rich man out of a river. That's not. It's exactly what Derek is doing right now," she said. "He's making it a headline instead of a truth. And once it's a headline, it stops being mine." Jiho crossed the room and stopped in front of her, close enough that she had to look up. "I remember 4 words," he said quietly. "I've remembered them for 3 years, in a voice I couldn't place until you said God you don't usually stop last week and something in me went very quiet." He reached, slowly, for her left hand, turning it palm up between them, the thin pale scar catching the office light. "Stay with me. I've got you. That's what you said, isn't it? In the water." Amara didn't pull her hand away. "Yes," she said. "That's what I said." The board convened an emergency session 2 days later, ostensibly about Derek Salas's termination. The investigation had concluded conclusively in Amara's favor, forensic logs airtight, but everyone in the room knew the real agenda underneath it. Jiho's grandmother spoke first, as she always did. "The merger with Yoon Industries has been 3 years in planning," she said, her gaze moving deliberately to Amara, seated at Jiho's insistence as the analyst whose work had exposed the leak. "I trust nothing that happened this week changes that. It changes it completely," Jiho said. The room went still. "Jiho." His grandmother's voice sharpened. "This is not a decision made from a boardroom scandal and a moment of misplaced gratitude. It's not gratitude." He didn't raise his voice, but something in it left no room for argument. 3 years ago, a stranger kept me alive on the bank of the Han River and vanished before I could learn her name. I have spent every year since trying to find her, and I finally have, and I am not walking away from that to satisfy a merger schedule." Yoon Seo-yun, seated near the middle of the table, spoke before anyone else could. "I'd like to say something, if I may." She glanced at Jiho, not unkindly. "I've known for months this wasn't going to be a real marriage. I agreed to it because my father asked me to, not because I wanted it." She looked at Amara directly. "I'm not going to stand here and pretend I'm the injured party in a story that was never really about me." The chairwoman's jaw tightened, but she said nothing further, and the silence that followed felt, for the first time in the meeting, like something other than a standoff. "There will be consequences," she said finally, quieter. "The Yoon family will not take this well." "I'll handle the Yoon family," Jiho said. "I built this company's crisis strategy myself. I can survive one uncomfortable phone call." After the meeting emptied, Amara stayed in her seat, hands folded on the table, watching him. "You didn't have to do that in front of everyone," she said. "I did, actually." He sat down beside her, closer than protocol required. "You spent 6 weeks watching me choose my company's convenience over the truth. I wasn't going to let you watch me do it a second time." "I still don't know what this is," Amara admitted. "Gratitude, guilt, something real, I can't always tell the difference with you yet." "Then don't decide today." He held her gaze steadily. "Decide when you trust the answer. I'll still be here." For the first time since the boardroom, Amara let herself believe that might actually be true. 3 weeks later, Amara found Jiho standing outside the small non-profit office his search team had operated out of for 3 years, the same team that had spent that entire time chasing a stranger who turned out to be sitting 6 desks away from him. "I closed it today," he said, handing her a folder. Inside was the search file itself, photographs of the accident site, transcripts of interviews with hospital staff, 3 years of dead ends, stamped across the front, case closed. Found. You kept all of this? She flipped through it slowly, something tightening in her throat at the sheer weight of 3 years spent looking for her. Every page. He watched her read it, hands in his pockets, none of the boardroom control left in his expression, just a man who had finally stopped searching. I used to think I owed you a thank you I could never deliver. I didn't expect the debt to turn into something I wanted to keep. Amara closed the folder and looked up at him. I used to think I'd have to choose between being respected for my work and being known for that night on the river. I didn't expect I could have both. You always had both, he said. I was just slow to see it. She laughed, short and real, the first easy sound she'd let herself make around him. Slow is one word for firing someone in under a minute. I'm aware. He reached for her hand, the one with the thin pale scar, and laced his fingers through hers without hesitation. Stay with me, he said quietly, echoing 4 words she'd once said to save his life, turning them into something entirely different now. I've got you. For as long as you'll let me. Amara Whitfield, who had spent 3 years being the one who did the saving and asked for nothing in return, let herself, finally, be caught. I'm listening, she said. Go ahead. And this time, she meant it a different way. Some rescues happen once, in an instant, in the dark. Others take 3 years, a boardroom, and the courage to finally say the truth out loud, and those are the ones that last. If you love stories where the people who quietly saved us finally get seen, subscribe to Light Romance Stories for more, and tell us, would you have told him sooner, or waited like Amara did?